All right. So, and then the best thing to do before you start is just to say your
Okay,
names and the
it's
date
Jan-
and everything like that, just so that we can identify.
January 29th of 2013, we're in the 502 Dispatch Hall in New Westminster. This is Dave Lomas here, along with Jim McKinley somewhere behind me here. And we're going to be interviewing Ron Noullett. And Ron, we have a number of questions here. Some you may not choose to answer, but we'll go through them generally. And just to get it started and to kick us off, the first question for you is, where did you work on the waterfront?
Where did I work on the waterfront? I worked everywhere on the waterfront. In New Westminster, we had docks, Pacific Coast terminals and overseas. We worked on the docks, we worked on the ships. We had one dock at Fraser Surrey Dock on the other side of the river from New Westminster. And it was a wheat ship only dock. And
What was the name of that dock?
It was the Searle elevator actually, and became Fraser Surrey Dock later on. But when I started, it was Searle elevator. There was a grain elevator there. The elevator people did the work as far as the spout, bringing the grain to the spout, and the longshoreman would place the spout in the ship and direct it. And as a casual, all I did was go down below after, level out, bag wheat. And we used to bag the wheat so that make a 5-high bag on the floor so that when the ship shifted during heavy seas, the wheat wouldn't run like water and take the ship over with it.
Where else did you work on the New Westminster waterfront?
Oh, I worked Pacific Coast terminals. We used to have, there was a cold storage there, so we used to bring in, we'd get load apples going out of BC, Okanagan apples. We used to bring in various, some fruit. We used to load nickel matty. It was, we used to call them, I can't remember now what we call them, rock ships, I believe.
Oh, lots of rock. Remember taking that job?
Rock ships. And we used to load bar lead, bar zinc, loose lumber, lots of loose lumber. We'd bring it alongside with straddle carriers and load it onto the ship. Overseas dock, we used to load a lot of fertilizer and flour sacks, loose sacks. We had one. We had a dock out at the Delta Rice Mills out by the Dease Tunnel, or whatever they call it now. We called it the Dease Tunnel at the time, and we used to get in a lot of coffee and rice at the rice mill, and they were all with big bags, large bags, 200-pound bags of coffee. We had lots of loose lumber off the scow. We had, that was pretty much it when I started. The loose lumber, lead, zinc bars, all kinds of loose sacks. That was pretty much it. And then the cold storage stuff.
What dock did you work on for the lumber?
All of the docks actually, because most of the lumber was came off of scows at that time, and then there was some at Pacific Coast terminals that we had a small lot at the end, and they would deliver it to the ship with the straddle carriers. But most of the docks handled lumber, and it was all off the scows.
Okay, we're going to switch gears a little here and start with you telling us how you started on the waterfront.
I started on the waterfront because I decided in my wisdom at 15 years old that I was going to quit school and make it on my own. And my dad said, well, that's fine. You can get out and get yourself a job then. And I had friends that were working on the waterfront already. Some of my school chums that were a little older than I was. My older brother had started here for a while, and so I had quite a few friends that were working on the waterfront before I came. So, you know, I came down, sat in the hall, and waited and waited and waited. And finally, you know, when they ran out of people, they would start picking the people that didn't have a number already, and I was lucky enough to get picked. But it only lasted one day because they found out I was only 15 years old and told me I should come back when the rule of the day was you had to be 18 to Longshore. And they told me to come back when I was 18. Well, luckily I came back shortly just after I turned 16, and again I got turned in for being too young, but it just happened that one of my friends, which was also my neighbor, his dad was a long-time longshoreman, and I was arguing with the dispatcher that I was 18 because you never had any identification those days. You just had a pink unemployment card that I used to get a new one every year from the time I was 13 until the time I was 18 when I was actually old enough to longshore.
All with different ages on them.
All with different ages on. Came back to bite me about 15 years ago when they had my CPP benefits had all different kinds of ages and stuff on it, and I had to get that straightened out. But you know, anyway, this friend of mine, his dad, I don't know if you guys want names or not. But,
Go ahead.
it was Mr. Andreessen to me, Andy Andreessen, and Norm Andreessen was a friend of mine, but he was a couple of years older. Anyways, he told the dispatcher, leave him alone, he's the same age as Normie. And I was okay after that. And the dispatcher at the time was a guy we used to call Bullfrog. Lester was his last name. Richard?
Lester. I think it was Lester.
Lester was his last name anyway. Anyway, that was how I got started. And I knew of the waterfront because I was a Surrey kid, and when we talked about going to town, that didn't mean going to Vancouver. That meant coming here from Surrey into New Westminster. And we used to, as kids, we used to hang around on the Westminster waterfront. And we used to hang around down the, getting into trouble down at the Surrey docks too, but there wasn't really much there other than the elevator, and they pumped sand up there, and we used to play on the sand dunes. So I knew of the waterfront. I was probably on the ships when I was 13 years old, getting into trouble with a bunch of friends. So that was I knew of the waterfront before I ever worked on it.
What was do you recall what the pay and the benefits were when you started?
I can recall that I was actually getting, my dad worked in a mill for years and years and years, and I believe he was getting $2.49 an hour, and when I started it was $2.52 an hour. And that coincided with the price of a case of beer with a
That's
church
right.
key in it. A wire church key, that was, we called them a church key. It was an opener, a wire opener that came in every case of beer. So it was $2.52 an hour.
Okay. Did you get any special training after you started, or as you worked yourself up to the certain boards in the local?
No, when I started, the training you got was most of the gangs were a 13-man gang. There was two winch drivers, a hatch tender, 2 slingmen, and these were all senior people, and 8 men down below, 4 on either side, and each side had a side runner. And that side runner was kind of like a gang boss, I guess. He called the shots. He decided how you were going to do it and where you were going to do it, and you kind of worked together. And there was a good competition between one side and the other, always trying to hang hook. We worked hard, and we were trying to, if you hung the hook, you got a break. If you weren't able to hang the hook, you just got a lot of work done and went home tired, and the company got the break. But
Did you work with the same people on a regular basis? Did you work with different people all the time?
oh, down below, you very much worked with pretty much the same people, because once you got on a board, you worked with either the 4 or 5 guys ahead of you, or the 4 or 5 guys below you, or maybe 2 ahead of you and 2 below you. So you kind of worked with mostly the same people, when we first started down here, and yeah, and you really got to work together. You got to know these people and knew how they worked.
Did you work anywhere else but New Westminster during your waterfront career?
Oh, in the early years, we used to go over to Vancouver, and we used to call wolfing jobs. When it was slack in our port, we would go over to Vancouver and work, and when it was slack in Vancouver, they would come over here to work. Other than that, mostly in New Westminster, Surrey, in this area, in the 502 area.
Did you ever travel to the island?
No, I never did. I never had that opportunity, I don't think.
Lots from here did.
Yeah.
How did the machines or the equipment that you used change over the years?
Oh, great. There was drastic change from the time I came in. Everything was hand stow. Soon after I came, we were using all different kinds of methods to load lumber. The ships changed. The ships changed from being ships with multi-tier decks in them to being a wide open hatch with no decks in, and a lot of the product was just we would got to the point where you started putting lift trucks down below, and the lift trucks would be stowing the lumber until you got into what was called the quay, and then you would take the lift truck out and just plant. We called it planting. We'd load that quay just by slings and drop the bundles into place. It was kind of like putting the last pieces into a puzzle, I guess.
Okay, what about the equipment? What were the changes in the equipment since you first started?
Well, when I first started, we used to have dollies, what we called dollies. They were like a wagon, and we would load a load of skid of apples, or a skid of bagged fertilizer or bagged flour on the dolly, and pull it or push it into what was called the wing. That was the wing, or the bulkhead. That was the below the decks, the extreme outside of the ship. It's where the gear couldn't reach with a load, and then we would offload the dolly by hand and stack up the bags or boxes, whatever it was we were loading. We went from dollies to, like I said earlier, to lift trucks down below. We tried lift trucks to bring loads of stuff into the wing, and do it that way. We used to on timbers. We used to move the stuff with PVs and steel rollers. Timbers being anything from bigger than 12 by 12, 12 by 12, 14 by 14. We used it also on the bigger of the Fletchers. I'm not sure exactly what the criteria was between a Fletcher and a timber, but my belief was timbers were 12 by 12 and bigger, and Fletchers were anything under that size, other than, I guess, down to 3 by 9 lumber, which you used to carry by hand and stow it that way, to, again, running forklifts down. The lumber came in packages, and we used to move the packages into the wings with forklifts, and we had one piece of equipment we called the Assassinator.
Yes.
And the Assassinator was, I guess to explain it, it was like calling it landing a load onto a skateboard, but this skateboard had rollers on the bottom and rollers on the top, and the rollers on the bottom would allow you to move the packaged lumber into the position you wanted to stow it. Then you would unlock the rollers on the top, which would allow you to pull the assassinator out from underneath the packaged lumber, leaving the package sitting there and the assassinator sitting somewhere out in the square, because when it came out from underneath the lumber, it came out with a shot, and it would quite often take somebody's ankle out, and it didn't take too many out, because we learned real quickly that this was a dangerous piece of equipment, and hence the name the assassinator. It would take you out if you weren't careful with it. On car ships, we've gone from I don't know how many different types. The first car ship I remember working was at the PCT 1D, and there was about 20 cars on it, and we had nets that we drove onto, and then the front and back wheels were on a set of nets, each on their own set of nets, and they had a frame to keep the nets from touching up against the car, a frame that was a little greater in size than what the wheelbase of the car was. and we'd pick them up with these nets and drop and offload them onto the dock, and then have somebody drive it away. That was the first car ship I can remember. Then we had these, they went to a deal where they had steel bars that would hinge open, and then you would hinge them around the wheels, doing the same thing as the net, but it was only four of these hanging off the same type of frame, and you'd hinge it open, put a pin in to keep it hinged shut, so that it wouldn't escape and fall out of the brackets, I guess, before it hit the dock. And we went from that to, they were, I can't remember what they called them, but it was a frame that you drove into, and as you lifted it, the front and back of the ramps at the front and back of the frame would fold up, so the car would sit loose in there. And you always left the car in neutral, because when you landed it on the dock, you would land it so that it was, one end would land on a 10 by 10 or a 8 by 8 block, and it would put the frame on an angle, and when it landed and the ramps, and you slacked off on the gear and the ramps went down, the car would roll out. It was automation, I guess, is what it was. And then we went to then we went to the ro-ro ships. The first ro-ro ship I can remember was, I believe it was called the Canada Ace, and it held 1,000 or 1,200 cars, which was just phenomenal at the time. And it was ramps. That particular one, I believe, had a side ramp, and we'd put the ramp in place and drive the cars off. All the decks inside were ramped, much like a ferry, but with very low decks, and so that they could maximize the amount of decks of cars they could get in there. A lot of the times you walked in there, anybody over 6 feet tall was bumping their head. Some of the ships had even less headroom than that. We had car ships that had elevators on that would bring the cars from all the various decks, maybe 8 decks from the bottom to the top, and then you would drive on the deck of the ship and down the ramp. But I think today most of our car ships are what we call ro-ro car ships. They roll on, roll off. Usually they have 1 and sometimes 2 ramps. Most often they have a ramp. The back end of the ship opens up onto the dock on an angle, and you can offload 2,000 cars in 4 hours or less on most times. So the car ships have come a long ways. We have bigger and bigger equipment on the dock all the time. We have most of our cargo now comes containers. Containers is a big thing. The first containers I ever loaded, it was a hell of a job because you were hooking them up, taking them off. You know, you were hooking hooks into the corners of them to lift it off with either standing gear or a crane. And now with the big gantry ships we have, everything's automatic. You land a big head onto the top of the container, it locks it in, take it to the dock. As soon as you touch the dock, it unlocks, or touch it's loaded right onto a multi or a bomb cart and taken away out into the yard where it's taken off with the reach stacker or big forklift. Sometimes it goes directly to the rail, and sometimes it's stockpiled in the yards. I've seen from the time I started, every day was labor intensive. It was all what we called hand stow work. Now there's very little hand stow. It's mostly machinery and containers. It's all just mechanized now.
So what was the relationship between the older and the younger workers on the waterfront when you started and as you went along in your career?
Oh, that was between the older and the younger. It was like when I was first starting out, I was taught, and I guess, and it was, you were taught to respect your elders. And your elders are the people you were going to learn from. At 16 years old, I could be on one end of a 3x9, and the guy on the other end of the 3x9 might have been 60 years old, with 40 years of seniority down here. And you didn't mouth off to these guys. You just worked and did your job. You didn't even have to. You didn't even have to be a big man to do your work. All you had to do is do your very best. And these guys, they respected you for working. You know, you worked hard. You went home tired. And these old guys, you learned from them, and you never mouthed off to them. They were the guys that taught you they taught you not only how to do the job. They taught you what the safety rules were. They taught you what our union rules were. I guess it was like a continuation of you know, at least for me, because I started for so young, it was just like a continuation of my growing up. You know,
and you're trying to tell us that you never mouthed off to these guys. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I mouthed off.
Ron, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. You know me. You know me. I mouthed off, and I got slapped for it too quite a few times. But every once in a while you stepped out of line. But we had some pretty strong guys and pretty big men that worked there, because they had worked all their lives working this heavy work. They came to the water. They had worked jobs that were tougher than the waterfront, and they came here because it was an easier job for them. So,
how did you socialize with your co-workers?
Well, personally for me, it was a lot of drinking. I started here. I was going into the bars. We had newest minister had the reputation of per capita having more bars per capita than any other place in BC. I could name all those old bars.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand. And as long as you were sitting with the old longshoremen and the longshoremen, you know, that were of age, and at that time the age was 21 and I was 16, and I was going in the bars, and I can remember celebrating my 21st birthday in the bar, and the bartender being so pissed off because he had been serving me for 5 years already. And that was most of our social. We had our annual longshore picnic, which was, for the best part, it was a very good deal. It was one day. It was one day when most guys put away the booze, and it was a family picnic, and it was a good time. We used to hold that out at Cultus Lake, and we used to have a lot of poker games. We used to play a lot of poker. It was, but it was not as social as it was now. We had that. We developed our pensioners banquet, but now we're having more Christmas parties, and I really like the idea of it, of the social part of it, because now we're spread out so much, and people are working in machinery, and they don't get to know the other people they're working with. These social events kind of bring us together a little bit.
And what union were you involved with, and what was your involvement in the union?
My union I was involved with, and it's the only union I've been involved with, was the ILWU, International Longshore Warehousemen's Union. I came in, worked for 10 years as a casual, and made membership in 1972. I've been on various caucuses and committees. I ran in 1974 for business agent and was defeated. I ran again in 1976 and was elected. And we have elections on an annual basis. I was business agent from 76 to 83 when I was defeated. And my life, having a change of lifestyle at that time, I didn't get away from the union, but I got a little less involved. I stayed on some of the committees. I went to work on a steady job down at the coal terminal, and got involved down there somewhat, but I wasn't quite so involved with the union on an official basis at that time.
What was the safety like on the job?
Safety was, for the most part, safety wasn't too bad in New Westminster. I'd like to believe that New Westminster, whenever there was a saying, if a ship came from New Westminster, down south they would even say that if a ship came from New Westminster, they knew it was pretty safe. We used to go through, it was standing gear and swinging sticks, mostly standing gear, but we used to go through the standing gear pretty good. We used to have pretty good safety checks. We used to make sure that the equipment was in good order.
Ship's equipment.
Ship's equipment. We used to do some things that you wouldn't do today, only because it was a learning process, and you learned from your mistakes what's safe and what's not. There were some of the things that we used to do down below to get a ship loaded, or even on the top side to get a ship loaded, are things that probably wouldn't be done today, because it wouldn't have been. It became, learning through experience. When you did something and something went wrong, you didn't do it again, and you made sure that went into your book of safety issues, that you don't do these things. We used to do all kinds of things. We used to use ship's slings to unload a lot of cargo, where we don't do that no more. We don't know how damaged the slings were, putting steel, especially steel, loads of steel into place. Once a sling is damaged, it's damaged. It loses its integrity. So, I believe that safety is an evolution. And I believe we're a fairly safe industry right today. I could be mistaken on that. I don't know what the statistics say, but that's my belief anyway.
Were you involved at all in shipping of nuclear material from the port of New Westminster?
Not to my recollection, I don't think I
You
was.
recall the yellow cake incident?
Oh, yes, I do, but I can't.
Okay.
I can't really recall. I can recall the incident, but I can't recall the specifics behind it.
Was there any women working on the waterfront when you started?
No. I think the first woman that came to the waterfront, and it's a shame that it was done in that fashion, in the New Westminster waterfront, was in the early 70s, I believe. And one of our union presidents at the time decided it would be a good thing to put women on the waterfront, but he put her on a job that was, and unbeknownst to the membership and unbeknownst to even the rest of the executive, unilaterally he put this woman out on a car ship, which was the prime job at that time. And unfortunately for him, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, he was impeached anyway. It's I have a daughter and a granddaughter on the waterfront right now. I wish that could have been sooner. I wish I could have had. I had our last go around. I had 3 grandkids that I tried to get onto the waterfront, and I was able to get one on. 2 of them girls and 1 boy. I got the oldest granddaughter on. So, yeah. I don't think that, well, there's some pretty good women out there, but it was tough work. It was very tough work, because as an 18-year-old kid.
Careful what you say now.
Yeah, I was looking over there. As an 18-year-old kid, I went home tired many days. It was 17, 18 years old. You went home tired. I know my granddaughter couldn't handle that kind of work. My granddaughter's not a very big girl.
I'm wondering if the president was impeached because of the decision to put the woman on the car ship? Was
Yes.
there was-
Because he put
the ladies were restless on that?
No, because he unilaterally did this, and the idea was if she would have stood in that hall and got her number the same as everybody else did when there was an extra
Maybe.
work,
Come
extra
on.
work, then she might have got it. She might have been able. That could have been the start of it. It certainly wasn't going to.
better.
It certainly wasn't going to be the start of it the way it was done. It was. It was pretty.
He was impeached because
But-
of circumvented the.
Yeah, that was the reason, yeah. What's your general feeling about working around the river, the Fraser River? Did you live on the river or near the river?
I lived near the river. I played on the river. Before I moved out to Surrey, I lived in Queensborough, and we lived right on the river. As kids, we used to play boom tag. We used to run around on the booms playing tag, and you learned not to step on those deadheads that were floating in the boom. I grew up on the river. I loved the river. This is, I've worked as a casual. I had to pick up extra jobs. I worked at the mill when it was slack, and I worked at when I started here. I was actually working. It was right after Hurricane Frida, and I worked for a company called Thompson Nurseries, and we were going around cleaning up yards, and we tried to do it in the UBC area and Point Grey area where all the trees were blown down, because that's where the money was, cleaning up the rich people's yards. And I was 15 years old, no driver's license, and driving this guy's truck and cleaning up yards and cleaning up branches. And we had a logger that was going up and doing the topping of the trees, and I worked there. My worst job, while I was trying to get up on the boards as a longshoreman, I worked in a mink pelting plant. And you went home and you undressed in the stairwell of the basement and you threw your clothes into a bucket because of the stench. And then you went into the basement and you washed before you went upstairs to have a shower or a bath. And you know, I did all kinds of jobs. I worked, you know, I had a family and I worked everything. I worked hides. Hides was one of the worst jobs on the waterfront, and the worst time would be in the summer, because they were raw salted hides, and they would ooze of guck coming out of them. And a lot of the times when gangs went from New Westminster to Vancouver, we got the hides.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. We used to see to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So tell us more about
And
the hides.
and when we come
That-
over here, we got the Fletchers.
the hides.
Yeah.
The hides were, they were piled up, bundled, and tied together mostly, and salted, and on top of pellet boards,
Inside out.
inside out. So inside out,
Slippery.
and they were slippery.
Slime.
And you used to go, on the hide ships, they would have buckets of water and soap, because you had to wash, and usually they had plastic, so you'd make yourself a plastic apron, tie it around, cut a hole, put it over your shoulders, and tie it around. It was
So this was loading up Alberta hides or something
Yeah.
for export?
hides for export, going to Japan mostly. We'd get a hide ship once a month, every month for a while.
I'll tell you a good story later.
Yeah.
How's the waterfront changed since you started working, and how do you feel about the changes?
Well, the work has become easier and easier and easier. I think the waterfront has progressed quite nicely. There was, of course, you never get what you want in negotiations or what you want out of life, but you know, when I started, we were one of the top paid industries around. Like I had said earlier, when I started Longshore, my dad would work many years in the mill, and he was getting $1.49 an hour as a senior man in the mill, and I started getting at $2.52 an hour. Mind you, he was working 40 hours a week, and I might get one day one week, and 3 days the next week, and 1 day the next week. It was, you know, we always made the same amount of money. And I believe that was the strength of our union, is that everybody got the same pay for the same work. And I still believe that's one of our strongest assets. But you worked your way up the ranks, and as you worked up the ranks, you were able to get better quality jobs, the easier jobs, and you were able to get more of them. But the pay stayed the same. Today, I think, you know, it's a fabulous job. It's you get paid premium money in town. If anybody, you know, I wish that everybody had the opportunity I did to, you know, because quite a few of us at that time didn't think too much of going to school. We wanted to get out there and go to work. I worked all my life since I was 13 years old trying to earn money. It's one of the best. It's the best job that could be had, as far as I'm concerned.
What was the effect of your working on the waterfront on your family?
Well, I worked a lot of hours, and I worked all the off shifts because those were the ones that paid the premium. And the effect on my family ended in a divorce, because I was drinking and working, and that's what I did. We were hard. We were proud of the fact that we were. Some of us were proud of the fact that we were hard workers and hard drinkers, and it cost me my family. Thank God I've learned from that. Today I'm 29, just about 30 years sober, and it's. I don't think I would have lasted on this industry if I would have continued the way I was.
No, you wouldn't have, because I remember you back then. Okay, is there anything further you want to add? Anything you want to say?
No, I think that pretty much tells it. I could tell story after story after story, but
Tell us.
Tell.
Tell us one.
oh, I don't know. I could tell you the story about talking about safety. I could tell you the story, and is it okay if I mention names?
Yeah.
There was we were working a steel ship over at Fraser Surrey Dock. I won't mention the guy that was driving the winch, but it was a crane, and we were taking out 40-foot, 6-inch pipe, and we used to load up the pipe in a safe limit, but a good size load, and the pipe we had wouldn't clear because it was 40-foot pipe, but it was, you know, you always had ragged ends. So a 40-foot pipe in a load actually might be 46, 47, 48 feet long, because you got some sticking out one end, some sticking out the other end. There was myself, Wilf Malloy, Kenny Henderson, and Terry Ringrose working down below. We had topside taking it out, and as it was, we were unloading this pipe, and we were taking it out of the hatch, and it swung so that it was absolutely fore and aft, which made it a little longer than what the hatch was wide. You had to get it kitty corner to clear the hatch. The winch driver didn't notice it at the time, and kept pulling. He was looking out at the dock and kept pulling on the levers, taking it out, and pulled until the strain was so great that one of the slings broke. The pipe turned on end, and when it turned on end and it jerked on the other sling, it broke. So now we're standing down below on the pipe, and it's only a half a hatch, so one end of the pipe is a 40-foot drop to the bottom. The other end of the pipe, the rest is slippery pipe you're walking on, and this pipe starts coming down. It's like a handful of pickup sticks, the game pickup sticks. So they start hitting, and they're shooting out every direction you could think of. We were all running for the ribs. Kenny Henderson and me on one side. We run and we jump in the ribs of the ship. The ships used to have the framework and steel on the outside, and we used to call that the ribs. So we jump inside the ribs for some protection. Terry Ringrose and Wilf Malloy, they run to the other side. And when the pipe's all settled, crashing and banging around and come to a standstill, Kenny and I we had a couple of bruises. We don't know if it was from jumping into the ribs or if we actually got hit. We don't remember. But we ran into we looked up, and the other side there was only the one man standing. That was Terry Ringrose. We couldn't see Wilf Malloy. So right away we started looking. We looked over the end, and he wasn't down anywhere down there, so we start looking down the ribs. And fortunately, where the ribs come down and it goes to a shear, there was some 4x4s sticking through, and he was draped over a 4x4. Luckily that 4x4 was there, or he would have went down the shear. You guys know what the shear is, but he would have went down the shear, and we wouldn't have been able to get him out of there. But he was hung over that 4x4, and we yelled for ladders and ropes and first aid men, and fortunately none of the other three of us weren't hurt. The foreman would come down quickly, and we got a ladder and we put it down, and I went down. Well, I'd gone down before because Wilf started to move around on the 4x4, and we were worried he was going to roll off of it and go down the sheer. So I was quite young at the time and quite agile, so I remember Terry Ringrose grabbing my hand, and I leaned backwards off of the pipe, so my back was touching the side of the ship, the inside of the ship, and I went down the pipe and along the ribs until I got a hold of him and held him from moving around, and talked to him and told him, don't move, you'll fall. We got down, we got a ladder down there, and they put the ladder down on the other side, and the foreman come down the ladder beside, and the guys were holding the ladder to keep it from moving. He come down with a rope, and we got a rope on him, and between the foreman and I, we got Wilf up onto the steel, and the first aidman attended to him, and I can remember there was blood coming out of his ears, and there was blood coming out of his nose, and I didn't know if he was alive or not. And, you know, the way things go, it's funny the way things go, because we got him there, we got him into the stretcher, we got him onto the dock, and it was time to go. It was time for us to come up out of the hatch. There was a step that we used to take it all the time from the pipe to the ladder. It was an inside ladder, and I can remember Terry couldn't make that step. We had to push some pipe through, and he had to crawl across until he got his hand on the rung, and the foreman was holding on to his belt loop until he got across and got his hand on the rung there. Kenny and I, we seemed to be okay. We got up on deck, and I can remember the first aidman says, I need to make a report and I need to have a witness. Now Kenny says, well, I'm gone. He says, I'm out of here. So he says, Ron, would you do that? I said, yeah. And I can remember when I went into the first aid room, I sat down in a chair and immediately started passing out. I guess the adrenaline had run off and the shock had set in, and I went out. I remember him coming to with those little vials of smelling salts. I can't remember what they call it. Spirits of ammonia. And I was fine until that point, but I was in a complete drenched sweat and passed out. I guess the adrenaline had run out and the shock had set in. That was one of my closest calls. I had a few others, but that was one of my closest calls on the waterfront.
Any other questions?
What do you think of the union's activities today moving forward? What, the officers and stuff, and the direction of the union?
Well,
Seriously.
well, I think I think we're a strong union, and we've been through shit before, and we're going through some stuff right now, and the same stuff we'd been through before.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see we need more education in our union, and I'm quite involved in that. About 5 years ago, I was bitching to one of our people that I was training him on the cat, and I was bitching to Timmy Farrell that, our people coming into the union nowadays, they don't have the education that we had. We learned from all those old guys. We used to come to the job, and we learned all our unionism, our safety. We learned from all the old guys. And nowadays, with the younger people coming on, people that are coming new to the waterfront, they come onto the waterfront, and it's mostly sitting in machinery, and it's not sitting in. There isn't as much lunchroom time. We're getting phone-in dispatch, so there's not as much time in the dispatch hall. You're not having people that are waiting around for jobs as much, so you're not getting that You're not getting that education that we grew up with. And, you know, you've got people on the job that got 6 months seniority trying to teach somebody that's got 6 weeks seniority what this industry is about and where we're going and where we came from. So I was bitching about this one day, and I said, these new guys, they should have to come and go through a class or something before they get sworn in. You know, other than, we're one of the few unions in the country that still, you have to be sponsored into the union. And you have to have a couple of sponsors to vouch for you to get in. You get sworn in front of the membership. But, you know, so he took that to the executive and told the executive, yeah, we want to start a committee, and we'll call it the orientation committee. So I was going out of town, so I missed that meeting. I don't miss very many meetings. I've missed one meeting since I've been retired, and I've been retired for 14 months now. And so he came back to work. I'd gone away for the weekend, and when I come back to work, I asked him, how'd the union meeting go? He said, fine, you got a new job. He says, you're part of the orientation committee. So right now, Joe Breaks, Jerry White, myself, got a few others. Lance Carlson has been coming. He's one of the few active members. So we got Roy Mass. We have a couple active members. We bring, as people come into the union, the week before they come in, we bring them into this room. We show them the film, We Are the ILWU, give them a copy of that. I've seen that film 50, 60 times since, and I'm not tired of it yet. I think I was telling Jerry the other day, when I get tired of seeing that film, I'm going to quit this committee. I hope I don't get tired of it. It's I love doing that once a month, going to the committee. We give them that. We give them our constitution and the current agreement. They get an opportunity that we never ever had. They get to read the oath that they're going to read that they're going to repeat in front of the membership.
That long drawn out oath you guys got?
Yes. Yeah, I hope that never changes.
Do you do the benefits as well?
Pardon me?
Cover the benefits as well?
Slightly,
Yeah.
and then we tell them a bit of a history of, you know, some of these pictures here. Our picture out there with all our presidents that went to Chilliwack Camp there over May Day, and you know, hopefully we're going to have a little unrest over this holiday we're coming up here in February. Maybe we'll see all our presidents in jail again. But yeah, so I'd like to see more education. Too many of our new people think that the company has given them these benefits. The company has given them these wages.
The conditions have always been here.
The conditions have always been here. They don't know the struggles. You know, we tell them, because we tell them about the Battle of Centennial and Pacific Coast Terminals being a tent city, and you know, the strikers on the outside and the strike breakers on the inside. You know, it's a good deal. I don't know if they're getting anything out of it, but month to month I get a good feeling out of it, and we get a lot of questions from them, and we get a lot of feedback, and I think for the most part, there's always going to be the ones that think it's just another bunch of bullshit, but for the most part, they're very interested, and you can tell the ones that are interested because they ask a lot more questions. You know, like they've never seen ships like that Liberty ship there. That's the ones that Dean and I learned to run winch on. Yeah.
Do you feel like the guys who have family members like dads and grandpas that were in the union, do you feel like they have a better sense of the sort
No.
of history? No?
Well, I know my daughter does.
Yeah.
She grew up with it. When I was business agent, my daughter used to come down to some of the ships with me. I think that's true for any any industry where somebody is involved, then their kids will
Mhm,
learn,
sure.
and they'll be involved. I was quite resentful. I wasn't a member's son, and you know, I felt, you know, there was a member's son's board, and those guys got a little preferential treatment. I never got that. I still have mixed feelings over that. I think as far as getting started, there should be something there for the members to have their kids get started. But once they're started, you got to divorce those kids. They're no longer kids. They're working in the industry, and keep your nose clean and go to work and do the next best thing and take care of the guy you're working with. And yeah, we got to take care of the people we're working with, no matter what. You know, even no matter how much you dislike somebody, if the company is picking on that guy's your brother or your sister.
Mhm.
You don't let nobody pick on your family.
Anything else?
No, I don't think.
Not
That
for
sounds
now?
like a nice place to end,
Okay, we'll end it now.
Push the red button.
Just the red button at the bottom.